You know what the world needs more of? Horror podcast run by guys named Matt. Well, I've got great news for you. You are listening to the inaugural episode of Certified Forgotten. And guess what? It's a horror podcast run by two guys named Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
So, yes, the premise is that Matt Donato, my co-host, and myself, Matt Monagle, are going to be talking about horror films. But before we get into that a little bit, I want you to learn a little bit about us. So, Matt, I'm going to let you start by kind of introducing yourself because I think you have the more impressive background in horror. So I want to put you out first and foremost, so people are like, "Oh shit, I'll listen to this guy."
Well, impressive, I don't know, is how I would describe it. But the first thing I would do is I just want to christen the podcast. I don't have a bottle of champagne or anything, so I'm just going to hold one little thing up to the microphone and give you 1 second.
Kristen,
Ha! The first beer of Certified Forgotten, a Cigar
it,
City High Lie.
it sounds delicious. I can't wait to have one myself.
Oh, 8%. It'll get you right there. But yes, so getting to who I am and why you should give a crap about me. So my name is Matt Donato. I am a freelance film critic, we'll call it at this point. I write for sites such as Slash Film, Bloody Disgusting, Dread Central, going down the list, Adam Insider, blah, blah, blah. You can find my stuff online. I hope you follow me already. Then I don't really have to get into that much detail. But for those of you who don't know me, I cover horror quite extensively. I make it my mission each year to see as much horror as I can. And we're not just talking studio horror, we're talking the smallest VOD releases, hitting every festival possible. I think at this point, I'm up to 7 or 8 horror film festivals a year, full attendance, full everything. So yeah, I dive headfirst into horror, and my goal is to basically compile the best list at the end of every year that highlights all horror from the smallest to the biggest to everything you haven't seen to what you should see to what just it's mind-boggling sometimes doing it, but it is what I love. It is what I do. I co-host a Christmas horror podcast because I love this crap so much. So yeah, the dedication there, everything is there. And when talking with Mr. Monocle, it really highlighted this idea that we want to do a podcast that is just horror passion forward. And thus Certified Forgotten was born.
Yeah, and I don't have quite the horror background that my esteemed colleague and friend Matt Donato has, but my name is Matt Monagle. I write for sites like Film School Rejects. I am write for the Austin Chronicle in my hometown of Austin, Texas, and I've written at a bunch of different sites. You can find my content in places like Fangoria or Daily Dread, RogerEbert.com, just kind of a slew of a variety of different places. But like Donato, I also have attended a lot of horror film festivals, both in New York City and here in Austin primarily. And kind of, I think the seed for this podcast actually started when Donato and I were talking about films that we had unknowingly seen at the same time at the New York City Horror Film Festival in 2000. I think it was 2011, right?
I think it was 13, actually. I was looking at the date on my reviews, actually, for that, and I do believe it was 13, but early 2000s, two white mats attending the same horror film festival. What?
Yeah, that felt like a sign. So the idea was like there were films that we had seen, and we might have even been in the audience at the same time before we knew each other. And these were movies that we really, really enjoyed, like really enjoyed. We both did our write ups and reviews for our publications. I was writing for Paracinema at the time, and Donato was writing for Everywhere at the time.
Well, I think at that
And
time it was just we got this covered, but yeah, it
okay,
was the same idea. We both did the write ups, we both did this coverage extensively, and we had to have been at the same theater because it was a small festival that only screened the films once. It was a weekend festival, so they did one screening.
right.
So yeah, we had to be in the same place, and we just never knew.
But those movies led to a conversation on Twitter not that long ago saying, it'd be great if there was some sort of a series, be it a podcast or an article series, that went through and sort of resurfaced some of these films that we had enjoyed seeing at festivals, but because they were so small, because their budgets were so low, they were never really going to get the kind of distribution that would put them on the radar of, mainstream horror critics or mainstream audiences in general. And that, I think, is where the main idea for Certified Forgotten, which of course is a play on words of certified fresh, came from. The idea of this podcast is to go back and find those horror films in the post Rotten Tomatoes era, which means anything past to anything late 2000 and beyond. Those horror films that we like or that we've heard good things about or that we want to seek out that have less than 5 reviews or less. And the premise there is that we are basically going to go kind of bargain bin diving, but bargain bin diving to a very specific purpose. We're not in this to make fun of these films.
No, not at all. And I wanted to stress that 100% because this kind of podcast format or article format, if we were writing about it, can very quickly become an easy punching down exercise. We know some of these smaller films don't get reviewed because, yes, the budget's terrible, they're not made well, and there's a reason no one's reviewing them. We know we're going to find these not so diamonds in the rough, and we know we're going to have to talk about them. So the bad episodes will be there. But again, our intention here is to find you the gems that you're missing, to find you films like Matt was referring to before. The first two we have on our minds. One was called Motivational Growth, one was called Found. Those are two films we saw at a, lower level, we'll call it, smaller horror film festival in New York City, not widely attended. I think one of the films I was maybe one of like 15 people in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
But you go to these festivals, you see these movies that you genuinely enjoy, and as Matt said, they kind of disappear off the radar. So our intent here is not to make this about making fun of lesser films. It's not to make fun of indies and try to take a piss kind of on these films. We 100% are here to be positive voices, and if we find a movie that isn't great, so be it. We have to be opinionated and we have to be honest with the listeners. But in the same respect, we're coming here with the full intent of giving you guys new movies to watch.
Yeah, and it's not like there is any shortage of these too, because there are increasingly over the past decade, there have been so many horror film festivals that have popped up, which I know we're both passionate about as viewers, people that attend to these festivals and really like going and seeing these films. But it's also a very important form of distribution for these movies. For a lot of these films that get accepted into festivals, playing at a place like the New York City Horror Film Festival or the Atlanta Horror Film Festival or Screamfest in LA, like any of these festivals, may be the only time they get seen in theaters. And so that is like their one moment to sort of shine. So part of that is us going back and finding them. Part of that is a lot of times for this means that we'll be looking at some foreign horror films since they tend to play well at uh, local festivals and not necessarily get a lot of attention after the fact. And I just have to say, one of the movies that we're going to be talking about in just a couple of weeks is a film called Sauna, which is legitimately one of my 5 favorite horror films of all time. So this is not us finding, like we are going to do those. There's a West vampire or werewolf Western that we both have our eye on that we're definitely going to talk about. But there are like some of our favorite movies, not just for a festival film or with one of those qualifiers. Some of our favorite films of all time are going to pop up on this list, and we're going to be talking about it with some ridiculously crazy good guests.
Yes, and I also did want to highlight that fact. It's not just going to be myself and Mr. Monagle every week. Every week we will have a new, they're going to be horror centric guests, journalists. Maybe someday we'll get to celebrities or whatnot. But we also do want to have a third voice coming in here to balance out Matt and myself. Why do you need another podcast with just two bros? That's really kind of where we're coming from in this. And we want to make sure that every kind of voice is heard on this podcast. So you will see many, many guests roll through here that are going to be bringing a lot of pedigree, a lot of, I don't want to tease who they are yet, but it's something to get excited about. And we're just excited about working with these people. So I'm very, very hyped on where this podcast could go just by the first few guests that we're going to bring in and we have slated.
Yeah, and I won't tease names, but I'll tease publications. If you frequently read online publications like Fangoria or like Bloody Disgusting or Daily Dread, guess what? We might have some familiar faces pop in.
Maybe Collider, maybe Dread Central, maybe right down the list. We're going right for the highest we can do right now. We're not going to sell you guys short.
The benefit of Matt going to all of these festivals is that he drinks at all these festivals, and that's how he's been able to build up these relationships. So, we're lucky to have him and his liver allow us these incredible.
Yeah, that's speak for yourself on that. I don't know if my liver agrees with you, but yeah, networking is half the battle, and it's my favorite part of going to these festivals. You watch the films, you write the reviews, but man, you got a few hours to party afterwards. Why not live it up?
So that's basically it. We're going to be on a bi-weekly schedule to start. If we kind of get things underway and it looks like we can manage more, we might speed that up a little bit. But the episodes will be an hour long. They'll be released every 2 weeks. You will have an excellent guest starting just in the very second episode. Now I can say second episode, the very first movie episode, the very second episode of the podcast. And, we are going to be setting up all that good social media stuff too. So we encourage you to get on there and share. It's all going to be Certified Forgotten on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And this, by the way, this recording that you heard at the beginning and it's about to play as we head out, we're very lucky to have a track by Morricone Youth, which is a New York-based band. They are, if you've ever done one of those wordless music performances where a live band plays over soundtracks, Morricone Youth does that for a lot of genre films. They write their own original soundtracks and do live accompaniments of films like Night of the Living Dead and Mad Max. And this track is Beat 'em or Burn 'em by Morricone Youth from their EP Night of the Living Dead. So we're not messing around here. We're getting some pretty good guns right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think we have some pretty big guns. I will agree with you, and I just want to thank everyone for kind of supporting this already. All of those that have responded to any tweets or whatnot, and seemed pretty excited about the idea. The guests that we've talked to, everyone that is coming out of the gate immediately with their support. This is getting us excited. This is getting us really kind of jazzed to do this podcast, and we want to do it to the best quality as possible. So I'll be going out and buying a new mic, and I'll be getting a new setup. And yeah, thank you so much for going on this journey of Certified Forgotten with Matt and myself. Hope it's as rewarding for you as it is for us.
We'll see you very soon.
Bye.